Something dangerous is unfolding across America right now, and it might consume you. Over 650,000 people are experiencing homelessness. Thousands live in RVs, and their situation is about to get way worse. And here's what changed everything. June 20th, 2025. The Supreme Court handed down a decision that removed the final legal protection keeping cities from criminalizing survival itself. City of Grants Pass versus Johnson.
The decision will have impact across the Bay Area, especially San Francisco.
Within months, 150 cities across 32 states strengthened ordinances targeting people living in vehicles. Towing surged, arrests multiplied, fines stacked up that nobody could pay. But in 10 states, things are even crazier, and if you see what these states are up to, you'll see why the RV homeless are hanging by a weak thread. The Supreme Court decision that changed everything. On June 28, 2025, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 in City of Grants Pass versus Johnson. Justice Gorsuch delivered the judgment, and now cities can enforce bans on public camping and sleeping. It doesn't matter even when shelter beds aren't available, or even when people have literally nowhere else to go, or even if they have RVs. All that matters is brutal enforcement. The ruling overturned Martin versus Boise, a 2018 Ninth Circuit decision that had protected homeless people across 9 western states. Martin established that punishing someone for sleeping outside when no shelter exists violates the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment. For 6 years, that precedent limited what cities could do. Grants Pass demolished it completely. Let us talk about the case. The case centered on 3 ordinances in Grants Pass, Oregon, with a population of 38,000 and an estimated homeless population of 600. The city banned sleeping on sidewalks, camping on public property, and overnight parking in parks. Penalties escalated with each enforcement protocol. The first violation only brought warning. Second, $295 fine. Unpaid? Then it jumps to $537.60. Already these people are homeless. Would they be if they had any money, or if they hadn't become victims of a harsh system? Where would they get money for these expensive fines? And if the homeless keep violating, that would be a criminal prosecution and possible jail time. This was why 2 homeless plaintiffs, Gloria Johnson and John Logan, sued on behalf of Grants Pass's involuntarily homeless population. They argued the ordinances violated the Eighth Amendment because the city lacked enough shelter beds. The district court agreed. The Ninth Circuit affirmed. Cities across the West operated under this framework. You can't punish people for sleeping outside if shelter isn't available. Then the Supreme Court reversed everything. Justice Gorsuch wrote that the Eighth Amendment doesn't determine whether cities can criminally penalize acts, it only regulates what penalties cities can impose. The distinction between status and conduct. You can't punish someone for being homeless, but you can punish them for the acts homeless people must do to survive. Sleeping, sitting, using blankets. Justice Sotomayor dissented sharply. Sleep is a biological necessity, not a crime. For some people, sleeping outside is their only option. The City of Grants Pass jails and fines those people for sleeping anywhere in public at any time, including in their cars, if they use as little as a blanket to keep warm or a rolled-up shirt as a pillow. For people with no access to shelter, that punishes them for being homeless. That is unconscionable and unconstitutional. But the majority disagreed, and with that ruling, everything changed. The immediate aftermath. Within hours, California Governor Gavin Newsom issued a statement praising the decision. There are simply no more excuses. It's time for everyone to do their part. 26 days later, July 25th, Newsom issued an executive order directing state agencies to adopt policies for clearing encampments on state property. The order encouraged local governments to follow suit. Translation: clear encampments or lose state funding. Cities across the West moved fast. San Francisco Mayor London Breed announced an aggressive campaign to clear encampments starting August. Portland Mayor Keith Wilson, elected on a promise to end unsheltered homelessness, ramped up RV towing from 38 monthly to 96. Sacramento intensified sweeps, Los Angeles followed. But the ruling didn't just affect the 9 states under Ninth Circuit jurisdiction, and we are talking about Alaska, Arizona, California, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, Washington. It gave legal cover nationwide. Cities in Illinois saw opportunities. Texas municipalities expanded enforcement. New Hampshire acted. Florida, which already passed a statewide camping ban in March 2024, doubled down. And RV dwellers? They became prime targets. Why? Because RVs are visible. They block bike lanes. Neighbors complain. They're easier to tow than tent encampments. A single truck hauls away someone's entire home in minutes. Problem solved from the city's perspective. From the residents' perspective, catastrophe. But understanding the legal shift is just the beginning. Because when you see how 10 states turned this ruling into brutal enforcement campaigns, specifically targeting RV homeless, you'll understand why it feels like an emergency evacuation order even without a single federal mandate. Number 10. California. The aggressive enforcement machine. California leads the crackdown by enormous margins. Home to approximately 1/3 of America's homeless population, the state's response to Grants Pass was immediate and sweeping. Governor Newsom didn't just encourage encampment clearances, he created enforcement mechanisms. In July 2024, he passed an executive order directing state agencies. In August 2024, there were threats to withhold funding from cities not clearing encampments fast enough. Then fast forward to August 2025, California created the SAFE Task Force, or State Action for Facilitation on Encampments if you prefer. Mouthful of words. SAFE targeted California's 10 largest cities for enforcement, but they aren't the only ones doing the enforcing. Since July 1, 2024, Caltrans removed over 12,000 encampments along state rights-of-way. They collected 267,611 cubic yards of debris. That's not homeless people moving voluntarily. That's systematic displacement. In San Francisco, the crackdown intensified dramatically. Mayor London Breed praised the ruling, saying it allows local politicians to control homeless encampments. The city launched what Breed called a very aggressive campaign. Sweep frequency increased. RV towing accelerated. Sacramento followed similar patterns. Mayor Darrell Steinberg supported Newsom's guidance, saying it aligned with the city's approach. I believe in compassionate enforcement, but residents describe something different. Sweeps happening with minimal notice. Belongings destroyed. People scattered. Los Angeles presents interesting contradictions. Mayor Karen Bass opposed the Grants Pass ruling initially, calling it unnecessary. She emphasized that strategies that just move people along from one neighborhood to the next or give citations instead of housing do not work. But pressure from Newsom forced action. LA County reported a 9.5% decrease in unsheltered homelessness between 2023 and 2024. Success or displacement to neighboring areas? San Jose, Oakland, Vallejo, Long Beach all ramped up enforcement. The pattern they followed was to identify encampments, post notices, offer shelter which was often miles away, or with restrictions people can't meet, then sweep, tow RVs, fine occupants, arrest those who refuse. It was simple, brutal, and efficient, the Californian way. And here's the kicker. California cities and counties report having approximately 71,000 emergency shelter and transitional housing beds. But California's homeless population? Over 181,000 as of January 2024. The math doesn't work. Where do the other 110,000 go? RVs became the answer, until cities started towing them, which brings us to the next state. Number 9. Oregon. Political battles over survival. Oregon's situation is complex because state law adds protections the Supreme Court ruling doesn't eliminate. House Bill 3115, passed in 2021 under then-House Speaker Tina Kotek, now governor by the way, requires cities to have objectively reasonable camping policies. The law gives homeless residents power to sue if policies aren't reasonable. After Grants Pass, the League of Oregon Cities declared modifying HB 3115 a top priority for the 2025 legislative session. They want clearer authority to clear camps. State Senator Mark Meek drafted a bill to simply repeal Kotek's changes, but Portland Mayor Keith Wilson said he won't support changes. I believe we can work within the current law to end camping in our public spaces. Our intent is not to criminalize homelessness. His actions tell a different story. Wilson announced plans to triple monthly RV towing from 38 to 96 by September 2025. Between July 2024 and July 2025, Portland towed roughly 680 RVs. The city received over 18,000 reports about beat-up RVs from the public during that period. Then Wilson made it harder to retrieve towed RVs. Previously, people could reclaim towed lived-in vehicles free within 30 days if they proved ownership. A 2017 policy designed to help homeless residents. Wilson rescinded it. Now, pay towing fees and the average cost is immense. It is well over $300. DJ Edwards, lot manager at Speeds Towing, which was contracted by Portland, described the old system. I had a good number of them where you start recognizing people because they have been back 2, 3, 4 times. Repeat customers. Get towed. Reclaim for free. Get towed again. The city decided free recovery encouraged the cycle. But for someone like Rochelle Lacey Powell, 59, who's lived in her RV for 5 years after domestic violence injuries cost her dental hygienist job, the change is devastating. She moves her RV every 4 days to avoid tow warnings. It's another thing that keeps her from focusing on her main goal of getting into permanent housing. The situation keeps getting worse, and in this next state, the enforcement is pretty intense. Number 8. Washington. The quiet intensification. Washington enforcement increased less dramatically than California or Oregon, but the pattern persists. Cities like Spokane, Bremerton, and Lakewood ramped up camp clearances and vehicle towing. Washougal, a Columbia River Gorge town of about 15,000, passed an ordinance making it illegal to camp on any publicly owned property. The initial penalty is a $75 fine, which seems mild compared to other states, but more violations lead to exclusion from areas and eventual arrest. James Jackson, who camped outside Washougal for approximately 10 years after back injuries forced early retirement and child support arrears accumulated, faces consequences. His car and boat were towed years ago with all his belongings and tools. The money to get your truck out of tow and then the money to get your boat out of tow, it was going to be a couple grand. Another one that kicked me right in the guts. So, I kind of just gave up. Mike McAtee, 66, lived in Washougal his entire life, now lives in his truck. You can't get an apartment around here for less than $1,500 per month. His vehicle allows him to dodge the camping ban as long as he follows vehicle movement rules. Washington's enforcement is characterized by local variation. Some cities prioritize outreach, others lead with citations. But the trend is clear. Increased pressure on vehicle dwellers. Just ask this next state. Number 7. Arizona. Desert displacement. Arizona falls under Ninth Circuit jurisdiction, so Grants Pass directly impacted enforcement ability. Cities across the state acted. Phoenix, Arizona's capital and 5th largest U.S. city, already operated structured campgrounds as alternatives to The Zone, a massive downtown homeless encampment. Post-Grants Pass, the city intensified efforts to move people into these structured sites or shelters. Those who refused, citations, tows, arrests. Proposition 312, an Arizona ballot measure passed November 2024 with 58% of votes, allows people to apply for property tax refunds if their local government doesn't enforce anti-camping ordinances. This creates financial pressure on cities to clear encampments aggressively. Failure to enforce means lost tax revenue. The implications for RV dwellers are severe. Arizona's desert climate makes living in vehicles during summer dangerous. Temperatures exceed 115 degrees. RVs without working AC become ovens. But parking somewhere with hookups requires permission and often money. Public land has restrictions. After Grants Pass, cities feel empowered to clear anyone camping in RVs on public property regardless of temperature. The same goes for this next state, but them being on this list makes things interesting. You can tell they've been wanting to do this for a long time. Number 6. Idaho. Following the Western trend. Idaho's connection to this issue is historical. Martin versus Boise originated here in 2018. Boise's camping ban was the subject of that landmark case. When Grants Pass overturned Martin, Idaho cities regained authority they'd lost for 6 years. Boise resumed enforcement. Other Idaho cities like Coeur d'Alene, Idaho Falls, Pocatello followed. The focus was clearing visible encampments, which increasingly means targeting RVs parked on streets or public lots. Idaho's homeless population is smaller than West Coast states, but the per capita impact is significant, and the enforcement philosophy mirrors other Western states. They offer shelter if available, then clear. But what if shelter isn't available? It didn't stop Idaho, and this next state just doesn't care. Number 5. Nevada. Reno and Las Vegas. Lead Nevada enforcement escalated dramatically. Reno and Sparks passed camping bans targeting people living in vehicles. Then Washoe County followed with a county-wide ordinance. The Washoe County Ordinance, passed March 2024 in a 3-2 vote, makes it a misdemeanor to camp on county-owned property or within 1,000 feet of the Truckee River, live in vehicles on county property or public spaces, and obstruct sidewalks. Violations could lead to arrest only if people refuse services. Doug Sobolik, who lived on Reno streets for 8 years, worries the ordinance gives law enforcement excuses to search belongings simply because someone's sleeping outside. You'll be targeted, so people that are using will be targeted first. I'm sure of that. Kyle Fall, 34, lost his Bay Area job and apartment. Couldn't afford storage. packed what he could into his van and traveled to northern Nevada. Got a job as an overnight porter at a Reno gas station. Lives in his RV. I just spent the last 4 or 5 years buying all these things to fill the space that I've been renting. A lot of my stuff ended up being left on the corner. Henderson, a Las Vegas suburb, passed a camping ban in June 2023. From August 2023 to September 2024, Henderson Police Department issued 150 citations or arrests among 99 people for camping or sleeping in public rights-of-way. One 51-year-old woman was arrested or cited 6 times during that period. But here's the problem. Henderson police don't typically transport to shelters, as the shelters are all located out of Henderson's jurisdiction. One woman cited was over 17 miles away from the nearest shelter bed. Without transportation, how does she comply? Clark County and Las Vegas adopted similar ordinances. Southern Nevada's 2024 point-in-time count identified 7,906 unhoused people, a 20% increase from the previous year. Instead of expanding housing, jurisdictions expanded enforcement, and Texas joined in on this horror show too. Number 4. Texas. Statewide patterns emerge. Texas passed statewide camping restrictions before grants pass, but the ruling emboldened municipalities to enforce more aggressively. Cities like Austin, Houston, and Dallas increased sweeps. Austin's situation is particularly notable. Voters reinstated a camping ban by referendum in 2021 after a previous ban was repealed. According to January 2023 point-in-time counts following the ban's reinstatement, Austin saw declines in visible homelessness. But that doesn't mean homelessness decreased. People scattered. Some left Austin entirely. Others moved to vehicles, including RVs. And when cities like Austin enforce vehicle restrictions alongside camping bans, displacement becomes permanent. This is something the people from this next state are used to. Number 3. Illinois. Midwestern expansion. Illinois cities, particularly Chicago, saw opportunities after grants pass. While Illinois doesn't face the same visible homelessness crisis as West Coast states, enforcement increased. Chicago already had ordinances restricting where people could sleep. Post-grants pass, enforcement tightened, ticketing increased, sweeps became more frequent, RVs parked on streets faced towing under abandoned vehicle ordinances even when someone clearly lived inside. The pattern of using existing laws more aggressively rather than passing new ones still brought the same ugly result. People were still homeless. So we aren't surprised that the next state took this same approach. Number 2. New Hampshire. Northeast Enforcement New Hampshire represents northeastern state responses. Manchester, the state's largest city, increased enforcement after grants pass. Portsmouth followed. Nashua implemented stricter policies. New Hampshire's cold winters make vehicle dwelling particularly dangerous. RVs without proper insulation or heating become death traps when temperatures drop below freezing. But enforcement doesn't pause for weather. Citations continue. Tows happen. People must find alternatives or face arrest. Now this brings us to the final state on this list. Coming in at number 1, Florida, the statewide ban model. Florida enacted a statewide camping ban March 2024, 3 months before grants pass. The law prohibited local governments from allowing homeless encampments on public land. Initial penalties were minimal, but on January 1, 2025, the second phase kicked in. Residents or business owners can sue local governments that don't remove homeless individuals from public spaces within 5 days of written complaints. This created a race to clear encampments before lawsuits arrived. And RVs? Prime targets. Visible. Easy to identify. Neighbors complain about them specifically. Then Hurricanes Helene and Milton hit September and October 2024. Some ended up in RVs through FEMA assistance or donations. But the camping ban doesn't distinguish between someone homeless before the storm and someone made homeless by disaster. Both face the same enforcement. These 10 states represent where enforcement intensified most dramatically. But understanding enforcement is only part of the story. Because when you hear the criticisms from advocates, legal experts, and people experiencing homelessness, you'll see why they call this approach brutal, counterproductive, and fundamentally inhumane. The brutal reality. Criticism and consequences. The National Homelessness Law Center tracks anti-homeless ordinances nationwide. Their data, at least 150 cities across 32 states have strengthened ordinances since grants pass. Jesse Rabinowitz, Campaigns and Communications Director for the center, describes the ruling's impact bluntly. This decision makes it easier to jail or ticket unhoused people, including youth, for sleeping outside, which will only make it more difficult to escape homelessness. Covenant House, which serves homeless youth, released a statement after grants pass. Dan Freed, a former Covenant House New York resident, explained, "As someone who was homeless as a teenager, I can say firsthand how difficult it is to get back on your feet. Creating criminal penalties to address homelessness will only worsen the issue and prevent the opportunity for those to get ahead. As the cycle advocacy groups describe, you are homeless, you get cited for sleeping outside, can't pay the fine, warrant issued, you get arrested, now you have a criminal record. Employers reject applications, landlords refuse to rent, you're more likely to remain homeless. The citation designed to help actually trapped you, and the situation still gets worse." The financial trap. Fines and fees accumulate impossibly. Grants Pass itself charged $295 for first violations. Multiple violations? Costs multiply. Henderson, Nevada, issued 150 citations in 13 months. Even at $100 per citation, which is lower than many jurisdictions, by the way, that's $15,000 in fines issued to 99 people who lack resources. Nick Shepak, Nevada State Director for the Fines and Fees Justice Center, analyzed Reno's community court data from July 2023 through June 2024. Of 669 people cited to community court, only 61 successfully completed requirements. 629 didn't show up to hearings and ended up with arrest warrants. Why didn't they show? No transportation, no phone to track court dates, no permanent address to receive notices. The system presumes resources homeless people don't have, and yet the system pushes them to lose more. The property loss. When cities sweep encampments or tow RVs, people lose belongings. Not just trash, medications, identification documents, tools needed for work, clothing, photos, everything that fits in an RV or tent. Portland's policy of holding towed RVs for 30 days has a darkness to them. After those 30 days, what follows is dismantling the RVs. This costs the city an upwards of $2,000 per vehicle, and not the owner, but the owner loses their home. Some cities store personal property for 60 days, but if someone doesn't have transportation to the storage facility or ID to claim items, possessions get destroyed anyway. Medications present particular dangers. Diabetics lose insulin, heart patients lose prescriptions, mental health medications disappear. The health consequences can be severe, and no amount of warning is making states, cities, and counties have sympathy. For instance, the county we'll tell you about next. The public defender problem. Clark County, Nevada, public defenders warned commissioners against adopting the county's anti-camping ordinance. Olivia Miller argued that even with shelter and treatment options theoretically available, not every unhoused person will be eligible for those services due to the restrictions that come with them. Clark County Commissioner Michael Clark noted the public defender's office will bear the burden. It's going to be the public defender and alternate public defender defending these people because they are indigent, because they are on the streets, and because they don't have a house or any assets. The public defender caseload increases. Taxpayers fund the prosecution and defense of people whose crime is being too poor to afford housing. The cost of this enforcement exceeds the cost of providing housing. But cities choose enforcement anyway. But does enforcement actually work? The evidence that enforcement doesn't work. Rand Corporation studied 3 instances of dismantling homeless encampments in Los Angeles in July 2024. They discovered that the sweeps failed to reduce the city's homeless population. People scattered to other areas, returned to original sites after enforcement left, or moved to vehicles. Research consistently shows sweeps create temporary reductions followed by quick returns. People need to exist somewhere. If you clear them from location A, they move to location B. Unless you provide housing, you're just moving people around. Benjamin Henwood, director of the USC Center for Homelessness, Housing and Health Equity Research, summarized the problem. It's fine to talk about clearing encampments, but it begs the question of where people will go. Where do they go? Into RVs if they can afford one. Then cities tow the RVs. Then where? The human cost seniors experiencing homelessness face 270% greater risk of death than housed seniors. Living in vehicles accelerates health decline. Extreme temperatures, both heat and cold, create life-threatening situations. Isolation increases depression and suicide risk. Constant displacement prevents people from accessing consistent medical care, maintaining employment, or building support networks needed to escape homelessness. Youth homelessness becomes harder to address when criminalization adds barriers. A teenager kicked out for being LGBTQ who ends up in an RV, then gets cited for illegal parking. now has a criminal record affecting education and job opportunities. The intervention meant to help created permanent obstacles. Still states, cities and counties believe they are on the right track. What cities say they're trying to do. Defenders of enforcement argue they're protecting public health and safety. Encampments can pose fire hazards. Human waste without sanitation creates health risks. Neighbors have legitimate concerns about safety in their communities. Cities claim they offer services before enforcement. Portland's Street Services Coordination Center coordinates outreach before police sweep camps. California's SAFE Task Force emphasizes connecting people with services, not just displacing them. Mayor Keith Wilson frames RV towing as necessary. He cited safety concerns. No RV dumping spots or hookups in Portland city limits means waste gets dumped into streets. Illegally parked RVs block bike lanes and emergency vehicle access. The counter-argument? If cities spent money creating sanitation stations, parking areas with hookups, and pathways to housing instead of spending it on towing, enforcement, courts, and jails, they'd solve problems instead of moving them. But will they do that? The missing piece: housing. Every expert agrees on the solution. There should be housing-first initiatives that provide permanent housing without preconditions like sobriety or employment have proven effective at reducing homelessness. Communities that reached functional zero homelessness for specific populations did so through housing investments, not enforcement, but housing costs money. Enforcement appears cheaper in the short term, even though it costs more long-term when you factor in emergency services, healthcare, courts, and jails. California invested over $27 billion in homelessness services under Newsom, but without corresponding investments in affordable housing construction. California is treating symptoms without curing disease. People cycle through shelters and back to streets. The cruel irony is, RVs became housing solutions for people priced out of apartments, yet cities respond by criminalizing that housing. But don't build alternatives people can afford. The Supreme Court removed legal protections in Grants Pass versus Johnson. Cities across America responded with intensified enforcement specifically targeting people living in vehicles. Over 150 cities strengthened ordinances. California leads with aggressive statewide coordination. Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Idaho, Nevada, Texas, Illinois, New Hampshire, and Florida followed with varying approaches. The result feels like an emergency evacuation, even without official orders. When Portland triples RV towing, when Henderson issues 150 citations in 13 months, when Washoe County criminalizes vehicle dwelling, when California clears 12,000 encampments in 18 months. The cumulative effect is systematic displacement. And where do people go? That question remains unanswered. Shelter beds don't exist in sufficient numbers. Affordable housing is scarce. Social services are overwhelmed. So people scatter, hide, move constantly to avoid tows, sleep during the day to avoid nighttime enforcement, live in fear of losing the RV that's their last shelter. The advocates are right. This approach doesn't work. It's expensive, counterproductive, inhumane. It criminalizes poverty and punishes people for biological necessities. Sleep isn't optional. Shelter isn't a luxury. These are survival needs. The solution exists. Build housing. Invest in permanent supportive housing. Create pathways out of homelessness instead of barriers. Stop treating homelessness as a crime and start treating it as the housing crisis it is. Political will determines whether solutions happen. And right now, politicians choose enforcement over investment, criminalization over compassion, sweeps over services. The 650,000 Americans experiencing homelessness deserve better. The thousands living in RVs as their last option deserve better. The families, seniors, veterans, youth, working people who can't afford housing deserve better. Until cities prioritize housing over handcuffs, the crisis will worsen. More ordinances will pass. More RVs will be towed. More people will face impossible choices between survival and compliance with laws designed to make them invisible. This is America's homelessness reality in late 2024 and 2025. If this shocks you, remember these are real people living this nightmare right now. Like this video, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video will show you which additional cities are planning to implement similar crackdowns in 2026, because this trend isn't slowing down. It's accelerating, and the warning signs are everywhere.